It's hard to describe the strange mood of early 2021. The war against coronavirus was far from over, but the vaccine rollout brought with it huge hope and also an increased understanding that wherever possible, life must go on.
Goddamn, you got me in love again. You got me in love again. You got me in love again. You got me in love again.
It did feel like a long, cold winter with a return to outdoor walks for millions as their daily exercise. And then the snow, a light white dusting, bringing childlike delight before making way for the first flushes of spring. I remember coming here to Windsor Great Park one lovely afternoon in late March. It was just as restrictions were beginning to ease, and it heralded the arrival of brighter days. With family allowed around outdoors, we had help from Keith and Julia in setting up our very own herb truck and dusted off Marion and Graham's garden furniture, ready to host my family for an Easter breakfast.
Here is a good ship, Andrew.
All aboard! As the weather warmed up, it was lovely to be able to start having adventures again with family and friends, including a memorable weekend in Cheltenham. And I'll never forget the wedding of my friend Remy in Singapore, which I attended virtually due to continuing travel restrictions. But the summer brought a sense that the end was at last in sight, with a further return to normality, a seaside holiday. And thanks to an army of volunteer vaccinators like Kristen, eventually it was my turn for a jab. All done? Buoyed by my shot came a great summer of catching up, with a stay at Centre Parks, meals out with friends, and visits to the Hampton Court Flower Show and Battle Proms. My niece discovered a genetic love of steam trains as we stepped aboard the Chinner and Princes Risborough Railway for afternoon tea to mark my sister's 30th birthday. Other highlights included the fun of the fair, a picnic at the Palace, and the Marble Arch Mound, a folly in more ways than one. As we stepped into autumn, it was time at last to reap what we had sown. They have done so well. And we weren't the only ones proud of what we'd grown. The safe delivery of my nephew Arthur brought such joy, crowning a season of celebrations and fun.
You hear it? You got me in love again. You got me in love again.
So on into winter, and with renewed caution due to the fast spread of the Omicron variant, we gingerly entered into the festive spirit.
Voila.
Despite fears of another cancelled Christmas, the government's green light allowed celebrations to proceed, and thankfully for us at least, the shadow of COVID caused little in the way of disruption to our family's plans. For better or worse, it must be said, coronavirus has never been far from the headlines. The scaled-back celebrations on New Year's Eve and systems of tiered regional restrictions had failed to stem the deadliest wave yet.
We must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant.
This time there was little of the early public spirit, and with cruel irony, that beacon of the first lockdown, Captain Sir Tom Moore, himself fell victim to the virus, and he wasn't the only old war hero to bow out.
It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty, the Queen, announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
It's understood the Duke had always wanted a no-fuss funeral, and what followed, bound up in the coronavirus laws of the time, was a fitting, very moving send-off. This year also saw the brutal murder of Sarah Everard at the hands of a serving Metropolitan policeman. In a tragic echo of 2016, a much-respected MP, Sir David Amos, was killed during a constituency surgery. And things could have been so much worse when a taxi bomber detonated an explosive on Remembrance Sunday. In Afghanistan, the speed of the Taliban takeover took the West by total surprise. Tens of thousands were evacuated in an extraordinary airlift operation. But still, the final withdrawal after years of fighting was an embarrassing mess. Not unrelated, the UK saw a record number of migrants risking their lives crossing the English Channel on dangerous dinghies. And on our shores, questions of racism in football, in cricket, and even in the royal family.
Concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
Some dismissed this as wokery, setting the stage for a new kind of TV channel.
Welcome to the launch of GB News.
It was all pretty shambolic, as was the blockage of the Suez Canal, taking 6 days to get traffic moving again. And it wasn't just supply chain hold-ups causing headaches on the high street. Several retailers closed their doors for good this year as brands went exclusively online. For all the changes in our lives, for now we still remain heavily dependent on oil, but there was hope in Glasgow.
In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery.
Promises for the Earth, but ambitions for the skies with a 21st century space race.
3, 2, 1, fire.
Richard Branson pipping Jeff Bezos to the post by just 9 days.
To the next generation of dreamers, just imagine what you can do.
There was an Olympic dream realised at last for Tom Daley and the UK's other gold medalists at the delayed Tokyo Games. In the Euros, the England team came so close to victory, yet the summer belonged to 18-year-old Emma Raducanu, whose fairy tale of New York saw her win the US Open.
How's that for an ending?
If only politicians were so sporting.
We will never give up, we will never concede.
Donald Trump accused of inciting violence after hundreds stormed the Capitol, witnessed firsthand by my colleagues.
And so here we are right now inside the halls of Congress.
If they'd hoped to stop due democratic process, they failed.
So help me God.
As Joe Biden was sworn in as America's 46th president. Back here in the year he married Carrie Simmons and had their second child together, the Prime Minister suffered sleepless nights. Lobbying by David Cameron and Owen Paterson prompted uncomfortable headlines. And as if that weren't enough, his former aide Dominic Cummings seemed permanently on the attack.
I think that the Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things.
In the end, it was this footage which finally sank Matt Hancock's career, showing him break his own rules on social distancing. And ITV News had evidence of a suspected party in Downing Street in 2020, again in breach of COVID rules.
It was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
Evening, Prime Minister! For now.
Professionally, it's been another proud year at ITN, including being asked to work on our coverage of Prince Philip's funeral, becoming the youngest writer on the flagship Evening News.
Good evening.
And helping launch a new style of News at 10 promo. And along the way, I've bid farewell to much-loved colleagues.
That's it.
In a year that's been truly testing at times,
Pleasant.
Kristen and I both separately caught the dreaded virus.
Bad news.
Thankfully, our symptoms were relatively mild and we kept our spirits up right to the end.
I now pronounce Andrew Burdett free of isolation.
But in all seriousness, it was a reminder that COVID remains at large. I guess I'm not alone in my mixed feelings for the last 12 months. After all, the cloud of this deadly disease shows no sign of lifting. But in a strange way, it does mean you appreciate life's little things all the more.